Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Bishop on air, back at it. And it's going to be another busy day. The State House and Senate coming into session, and they are scheduled to adjourn May 24th. And they're even scheduled in this Saturday and Sunday. So we'll see what they ultimately do in the long run, but they've got a lot of work to do. Short segments, one segment, just because I got to get over to the State House. There's tons going on, including the Illinois Supreme Court holding hearings, dealing with things like one case, questions about the Pretrial Fairness Act and somebody being held with without cash bond for a particular crime. And then you've got other cases they'll be hearing as well, dealing with individuals facing criminal charges on things. Then we've got the Firefighters Memorial that's going to be being held in Springfield and so much more, including legislative session with the House and Senate doing stuff. So they've got deadlines rapidly approaching, and they've got a May 24th adjournment date. Now, they have until the end of May to pass a budget with simple majorities, but they're already seeing some problems. Something we'll talk about to start off the next segment here with Bishop on Air. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. A State House roundup for you on this Tuesday with Bishop on Air with tons going on. We'll talk about the budget. We'll talk about a new lawsuit that's been filed and so much more. Let me encourage you again to go over and check out thecentersquare.com, thecentersquare.com. If you look under states and find Illinois, you'll find a plethora of stories that you can follow and track, dealing with everything from the governor putting out a memo about $800 million in cuts to the status of farming in Illinois and everything in between, especially when it impacts you, the taxpayer. But let's go ahead and check out some of these headlines. Of course, the State House is in session with the House and Senate. Both chambers return today. They have a May 24th scheduled adjournment date, but they have budget contingency days scheduled through May 31st. May 31st is the day constitutionally that the Illinois General Assembly has to pass a balanced budget with simple majorities. Now, if they go past that, they have to get super majorities to enact a budget bill immediately. But with controversy about possible tax increases and so on, it can definitely make for a pretty contentious situation. So you'll see one of the headlines here. Pritzker, $800 million cut memo sends message to balanced budget. If you missed this story from last week, go check out previous videos here where we discussed in detail and read a lot of that memo, essentially saying that the tax increases that the governor proposed back in February as part of his $52.7 billion budget, the largest budget in state history, He wanted $1 billion in tax increases, but he's with the time just remaining about 2 weeks, he's seeing the writing on the wall that the tax increases are not popular. He was asked about it yesterday at a separate event.
I don't think it's some faction or another. You know, there was some talk in caucus meetings that were occurring in the House or the Senate in which people had raised concerns or objections. Some of it which is misinformation, or they don't have the right information about what we're doing. For example, there's some people who think that the increase in the sports betting percentage tax is against sports bettors themselves. That's not the case. It's only on the sports betting companies, right? DraftKings, FanDuel, other companies like that. And similarly on the other matter, which is somewhat complex, net operating loss carryforwards. Not everybody's familiar with those, but we actually have lowered the tax on net operating loss carryforwards from what it had been. There had been a limitation of 100,000. We raised that limitation to 500,000, so more companies could take deductions essentially on their taxes. So having said that, we realize that we may not be able to get to all of the members or explain it properly to all of them, and just wanted to make sure that they understood, that our leaders of our agencies needed to understand that if those new revenues don't come through, that we'll probably be hearing from the legislature about cuts that they want to make, and so we wanted to put everybody on notice. That's the real purpose of that memo.
So again, the governor talking about this memo, being asked about it yesterday. Where was the opposition from? You heard him talk about the sports bettors company tax, but also the business loss deductions. He was also looking to essentially cap the retailers' discounts that retailers get for collecting and remitting sales taxes, acting as the government's tax collector at the store and giving those back to the government. All of these adding up to about $1 billion in tax increases. The governor's office indicating that they're not popular, so they're going to ask the state agencies to find $800 million in cuts. But again, the question was asked a separate way. Where was the major opposition coming from for all of these?
Yeah, I think I couldn't identify them for you. I think more broadly, obviously there are Republicans who object to some of it. There are Democrats who've expressed some objection. We're hoping that people come to a better understanding of it, or they decide to make changes to the budget. Remember, I introduced a budget in February. This is the normal process, right? It's a balanced budget. Then it goes to the legislature. It's really up to the legislature at that point to make decisions about whether they like what was in that original budget, what they might want to change. For the most part, the legislature has accepted my budgets, 90-95% of them, and made tweaks to them that they've seen fit or that we've negotiated over time. And then at the end, there's a vote on it. So my one principle around this budget is it's got to be balanced. So whatever happens here, we're not going to overspend. We're not going to start sweeping dollars from accounts that had been done before I became governor. We're not going to go back to the old practices of making us a credit unworthy state. And so we've got to balance the budget, and that's the real message that I think everybody in the legislature knows that I'm sending.
So obviously it's going to be crunch time here with just a couple of weeks of the state legislature in session, a $52.7 billion proposed budget, but the governor already indicating that it's going to be $800,000 less. And Republicans pointed out that they said, I told you so. Back in February, they said this budget spends too much. They can't rely on $1 billion of increased taxes because it's not going to be good to continue to tax the Illinois population. They also said that ARPA dollars, federal COVID-19 relief tax dollars, drying up, and the programs that were created under COVID should not have been sustained because they were based off of COVID federal dollars. So those are drying up, and even the Pritzker administration noting that in their memo to the agencies. We're going to track this as we can. One of the things of following the State House as long as I have, about 10 years now, it's fascinating to see the last minute deals that pop up, and in the final hours of session, they'll take a bill, gut it, replace it, and then they'll get it across the finish line. And then it's going to be essentially the public having to wait until they pass it to see what's in it. And then we'll have the budget signing ceremony and all of the programs and the celebrations that those who supported the budget will tout, and especially member district projects where they get special things carved out for, some people call them pork projects, other people call them infrastructure projects. But regardless, there's a lot that's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. So hopefully you stay with us with Bishop on Air. And again, don't forget to go and follow Illinois on thecentersquare.com. Some of the other headlines: Illinois' electric vehicle rebates may be scaled back. This was something that was discussed in a House Revenue and Finance Committee, where they said, hey, $20 million the first round, $12 million the second round. It was a very popular program, but it's something that they want to make sure is focused on lower income people, to give them $4,000 tax credit on a new EV or a used EV. And then you've got others saying, listen, the market, it's just not as vibrant as people had hoped it would be. And others saying we need to stop giving tax credits to try to force people into this, when it really should just be a free and open market. Another headline at thecentersquare.com: candidates file lawsuit challenging Illinois' hastily changed election law. There you can see that story and find out more about the lawsuit that was filed here in Sangamon County, challenging the law that they took a bill about DCFS, gutted it, replaced it within 2 days. They passed it out of both chambers, and the governor signed it within 3 days. And he said it was an ethics bill, but what it did was it changed election law mid-election year to say that you couldn't slate a candidate if that candidate didn't run in the primary. A law that's been around in the books for years in Illinois that they could have changed last year before the election cycle began. Instead, they waited in mid-cycle to change this and sign it and make it effective. And you've got candidates that were preparing to slate themselves for the June 3rd deadline, which hasn't even happened yet. They're suing. They're still going to file their paperwork, from my understanding, to work with the State Board of Elections in that process. And the State Board of Elections says they're going to take those nominating petitions and they're going to let the objection process play out unless a court orders them to reverse course and to uphold this law blocking slating of candidates. So others are going to say this is ethics, while Republicans look at it and say this is election interference. So another headline you could see there at thecentersquare.com. So plenty of stuff to check out, and we'll of course be updating that all throughout. Greatly appreciate you guys checking it out, and be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. All right, it is Bishop on Air. All right, like I said, short show, one segment, just an Illinois roundup. We'll do what we can to keep you guys posted, so join me live tomorrow with Bishop on Air. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. I got to get out of here. The legislature starting here up soon, and even the Illinois Supreme Court, they begin their at 9 o'clock. If you want to follow along with that, go to blueroomstream.com. They do have a free feed for the Illinois Supreme Court, and you can watch those cases. So, got to get out of here. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of the day. All right, peace out.